Welcome, everyone. So, we are so glad to have you join us today as a part of this exciting journey. This is a place where we learn, we come and learn together. So, let's get started. As a quick reminder, the Women in AI Canada Hackathon 2025 that runs virtually from October 6th to November 7th. And we truly appreciate your enthusiasm and energy. And for this, about this event, I'm going to share about what our current schedule with the hackathon, which workshop is going on and all. And just to make sure, if you haven't already, please make sure you try to connect through Discord channel for more updates and collaboration with your teammates and the mentors as well. And if you have any questions throughout the event, you can always reach out to our hackathon email. And about our event, the Women in AI Canada Hackathon, this is all about empowering participants to apply for social good. And as I mentioned, so this is from October 6th to November 7th. So here, this includes diverse teams so that are collaborating to create conceptual programs, prototypes, and business models that tackle meaningful real-world challenges. So as we always mention, this hackathon is not just about coding. It's about design, innovation, and the teamwork you all bring here together. So through these workshops, we offer and the mentorship and the pitch sessions. So you'll gain valuable experience and connections with professionals in the AI community here. Also, Women in AI Canada is part of a global network of over 1,400 plus members. So we are also working to our main motive is to close the gender gap in AI and inspire the next generation of female leaders. Here, our mission is to make AI inclusive and beneficial for everyone. And I'll move on to our hackathon schedule now. So here's a quick look at our ongoing schedule. We have already had two great sessions done, building agentic AI products, and we have also done, validating your hackathon idea. So for today's session, which is focused on design thinking, one of the most essential frameworks for developing user-centered, impactful AI solutions. So after today, we'll continue with sessions on understanding user needs, responsible AI, prototyping, branding, and pitching. So which all designed to help you refine your hackathon projects from idea to impact. And now the exciting part. So we have our speaker today, Ivey Chiu. So she's a senior manager, AI research, partnerships, and AI for good at TELUS. So Ivey leads a diverse portfolio of AI initiatives across responsible AI, people analytics, and sustainability. Her team has been recognized with two consecutive industry sustainability awards from the Global Generative AI Association, highlighting TELUS' commitment to using technology for good. She's also been honored with multiple recognitions, including in the Women in AI Canada Special Jury Recognition in 2022. And at the TELUS, she has got a Chola Champion of Diversity, Equality, and Inclusive Award, and also with a PhD in Mechanical and Industrial Engineering from the University of Toronto. Ivy combines technical depth with strategic leadership, so which is where she inspires others to use AI ethically and inclusively. So I'm really overwhelmed of she joined here today. So please join me in welcoming Ivy here as she takes this session through design thinking, so which is a crucial mindset and methodology to guide your hackathon journey going forward. Yeah, let's welcome Ivy.
All right. Thank you so much for the great intro. Let me just share my screen so that I can present the design thinking slides that I worked through. So once again, thank you very much. Very honored to be here presenting our design thinking workshop. And also just wanted to say that we are proud supporters of Women in AI. And this is the third year that we've been back supporting the hackathon. So some of you who have seen me before, that's why you've seen me before. So to the main part of the presentation, today I'm going to be giving you a quick walkthrough of design thinking. Specifically, I entitled this Innovate Through Design Thinking. And while we are working on design thinking for AI, I actually want everyone to take a step back and imagine that you can apply design thinking to any technology that you may be working with. So it doesn't have to be AI only. And also, I also encourage you to apply design thinking to even your personal lives. You know, how can you approach these complex problems that often arise? So, and that brings us to the first topic that I wanted to talk about in design thinking. So talking about just what is design thinking. So one of the ways of thinking about design thinking is that it is a method or a technique to enable you to solve complex problems while putting the user, so whether it's yourself, where you're trying to apply design thinking to your personal life or to your family life or your professional life, or the user when you're trying to design for your end user in your system of whatever technology that you're designing for. And one of the things I do want to emphasize about design thinking is that it does encourage user-centric design, in that you're not just trying to use a technology or a method or a technique. You are trying to help the user, the end user, solve a problem. The other thing with design thinking, and I think this is one of the things that we want to see in all designs, is that it helps to increase creativity within our design. And what we can think of in terms of creativity is that here, I think the definition we're going to use for innovation is applied creativity. And one of the things that I'm sure all of you have noticed, especially in the consumer product space, is innovation is essential to success and appeals to customers. So while we oftentimes can think of this sort of in the consumer product space, so think of things like iPhones, Android phones, iPads, and different tablets and different media players, this often is also the case in process design and other types of design as well. So architectural design, automotive design, healthcare design. So that is sort of like a quick intro to design thinking. This has already been covered a little bit, but I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into sort of my design thinking CV. So, I was introduced already, but I just wanted to delve a little bit deeper in sort of what I've been doing with design thinking. So I do have a PhD in mechanical and industrial engineering, specifically in a discipline called design theory and methodology. And specifically, when I was studying this in grad school, I was looking at applying natural language processing to the design process. So both in a way to generate design and also to evaluate design. So this is sort of where the worlds of design thinking and also AI and natural language processing started to collide. I also just wanted to give you sort of like a timeline when I was working on this. So I first started my master's work in 2003, and I convocated with my PhD in 2009. So I want you to think about, that in relationship to ChatGPT and sort of like a lot of the other sort of like AI that has been coming out. Additionally, more recently, I have an IDOU design thinking certificate. And IDEO is certainly a pioneer in the design thinking space. So it's certainly very, very interesting to kind of like come back almost 2 decades later and sort of take a look at their methodology and how it has grown and how it's applied to many more fields other than product design. I've also instructed engineering design courses, both at the first year and the 4th year level. I've won a series of innovation challenges at TELUS, and I generally have a very innovative portfolio at TELUS as well, because I work with our AI research partners. And then I'm also past president of the TELUS engineering community, where we do run streams of innovation challenges and academic collaborations. So that's sort of my design thinking CV. And then just very quickly, I know some of you are starting to ask or form this question in your mind. Well, how do you actually apply NLP to engineering design? So as I mentioned, one of the things that I worked at is being able to use natural language processing to help generate more creative and innovative design. So one of the things that I researched and did experiments on was something called biomimetic design, which is where we're using biological phenomena as an inspiration for solutions in the engineering space. So, in fact, all of us in AI probably have heard the term neural networks. That is actually a prime example of biomimetic design, where we're using the idea or the analogy of the human brain and activating neurons to solve problems. So going back to biomimetic design and then also being able to use natural language processing, one of the questions that, one of the test questions that we would ask ourselves is how can engineers leverage biological text? So think of like all the biological knowledge that we have in the world, and how can we leverage these biological texts to discover relevant biological phenomena to solve a problem that we probably often see every day, which is sticking things together or attaching parts. So this is where we can use natural language processing to look into those texts, look at some key functional words such as to stick, to attach, and to fasten. And then what we do is we are able to retrieve these biological phenomena or these biological things that perform those actions. And then we could further examine those things to see if they have mechanisms that we can replicate sort of in an engineering sense. So one of the other ways that I use natural language processing within the design process is actually evaluating concept creativity. So what we've already talked about very briefly is that creative and innovative products and services appeal to customers. So when we take a look at a lot of like our consumer products that we purchase every day, or even any of the services or anything that we would actually encounter as consumers. So this idea actually goes back a long time, back to the 80s. So back to like 1984, where Kano was talking about trying to elicit customer delight. So the question now here that I'm asking about customer delight and product or service innovation is, well, what is creativity? Is it novelty? Is it usefulness? Is it something else? And more importantly, how do we measure it? So through a series of experiments where I asked people to rate various different objects, like the Stark juicer on the left versus our traditional juicer on the right, I was actually able to come up with this equation where concept creativity is only about 60% novelty, where novelty is newness. There's also a component of usefulness to the product. So does it actually do what it's supposed to do? And interestingly enough, there's something else that is also called cohesiveness, or a sense of, does this actually make sense? So what this shows is that when you have innovative or creative products, it's not just something that's new or that you've never seen before. There are also other components that go into making this product or service creative. And that is how you actually appeal to customers. All right. Now going into design thinking and talking more about the stages of design thinking and how you can apply it to your hackathon ideas. So the model that I'm using is taken from fairly standard design thinking models. There are many, of course. I chose this one because it's fairly brief. So in this one, there are 5 steps. So, and some of these steps you can actually perform together, as I'll show you. So the first step is to empathize with your user's needs. So trying to just understand your user. Step 2 is to define and identify the needs and problems. So this is where you start breaking down your user's needs and problems. And then step 3 is to ideate. So this is where you're looking at developing potential solutions to expand how you're addressing the user's needs and problems. And this is also actually where you're expanding your solution space. And oftentimes, I think everyone here is familiar with the idea of brainstorming. So this is actually where brainstorming fits. And then what also happens in the ideation phase, as you could tell, several things got smooshed together, is that once you have your expanded solution space, you then actually have to work to converge your solution space so that you can then move on to the next step, which is prototyping, which includes transforming your idea into a tangible solution. So it could be actually a lo-fi prototype where you're using pen and paper, and you're using a couple of your friends to walk through things, or it could be a higher fidelity prototype where you're actually modeling things, via code, or you're building things physically. And then 5 is test your solution. So what you can see in this design thinking model is that you have a series of divergent thinking where you're trying to expand everything, and then convergent thinking where you're aiming towards a solution. So that's sort of like the basic design thinking model that I'm presenting here. So then next. So we're gonna try an exercise here. So we're actually putting steps 1 and 2 together, where we're taking a look at users and user needs. So in the next few minutes, so I'm gonna ask you maybe start a chat with with some of your group members in your hackathon teams. So in the next few minutes, what I want you to do is take a look at this picture. And then ask yourself 2 things. So first, we need to understand the user. The user. And then the second is that we need to identify the needs and problems of the users. So I'm gonna, start a timer for 2 minutes, and if you could just, start, looking at being able to understand the user for step 1, and then defining like the needs and problems of the user. So I'm just gonna say go now. So perhaps like ping your project groups. And remember, you can have multiple users, multiple user needs. And because we're on steps 1 and 2, we're actually in the part where we're trying to expand your solution space. So we have another minute. Oh, I see a chat.
I mean, you can unmute yourself if you wish to
Yeah.
talk right now as well.
We have another. Go ahead.
Is the question clear? Like, is the question clear? Would anybody like to attempt what Ivy has asked?
Yeah, we're gonna open this for discussion, like a little bit of discussion before going on to step 3, which I accidentally moved forward to, but we'll do that. So another 15 seconds. And yeah, we've had 2 minutes to work on this. I know it says 3, but I think leaving some time for more interaction. So anyone want to take a crack at being able to, provide sort of what they worked on for steps 1 and 2? And there are no wrong answers here. This is actually the beauty of design thinking.
Yep. Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we are a team of Chiu. So our main goal is to creating a cloud optimization tool, like a FinOps tool with wherever the opportunities we can cut down the cloud cost. So we are facing in our organization currently where we can able to cut down the cost because it's going too much, and what are the resource or service, because all the services we can't go with that same approach. So we are figuring out what are the approach for the database like RDS or the servers EC2 and the other storage like S3 and other services, especially with AI related service like Bedrock, SageMaker, and of course the Open Search. These are the services costing too much for us. Yeah,
Okay, so I think your user needs is optimized cloud service,
cloud cost.
a-
Yeah,
and then one of your user needs is to be able to reduce the cost.
yeah, that is
Okay.
our
Yeah.
main goal. Like here, the users are who are all using the cloud
Yeah.
providers, not only the, like for example AWS, Azure. We are doing multi-cloud also. In future, we don't know what are the
Yeah.
provider we are going to include. So yeah, that is the
Okay.
user need here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is, this is the problem. We are spending so huge amount in US dollar, not we are paying the Canadian dollar. We are spending so much US dollar every
All
month.
right. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to apply steps 1 and 2 to your specific hackathon problem. So I think maybe what we'll do is, uh, if there's another person who is willing to share their sort of steps 1 and 2 for this specific icebreaker that I had put on the screen. Is there anyone who wants to take a crack at this one? Again, no wrong answers. It's interesting to
Yeah.
see what everyone thought up of.
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking like it's looking like a tire,
Yeah.
and maybe the user who are having vehicles, four-wheeler, two-wheeler vehicles, and the user need is like when snowfall is happening, and then what are the needs they need to do for to preserve their tires, so like snow tires, and these are the problem is like understand the user need part is like when the snow is falling and the tires are not in a mode to address that particular snowfall. So the solution may be like we need to change our tire to snow tires.
Okay.
So the to identify the needs and the problems, maybe I don't know, it's
Yeah.
just my
Yeah. It's yeah, thank you for sharing. So yeah, that's interesting take that, how do we address snow tires and snow tire usage, or in this case, what this is, it's a tire swing for kids. And then one of the the way I looked at this is like one of the user needs for this is like, how do we use a swing in winter in the snow, right? So that's one of the other ways of sort of like looking at this. But like I said, there's no wrong answers, and in fact, like the way that we've been sharing this and thinking about this helps us to think divergently about our problem that we're trying to solve. So I'm going to move on to step 3. So step 3, I think everyone, like I've mentioned before very briefly, is familiar with in terms of brainstorming, right? Everyone has shown up to a brainstorming session. I'm sure even in this hackathon, you've done multiple rounds of brainstorming already, but like I think this is something that everyone's quite familiar with. So the idea here in step 3, which is to ideate or create more ideas or conceptual designs, is that you want to expand your solution space. So this is where, there is no rules or no filter to what you're doing. And one of the ways that you could go about this is to pretend that there are no constraints. So no constraints like time, because oftentimes we will, cut ourselves short by saying there's not enough time, right? And then in one of the other sort of user needs for the optimizing the cloud computing or cloud computing idea is that it takes a lot of money, right? We all know that money is a finite resource. Some of the other interesting things that we could think about is like, well, what if there's also like no physical constraints, like there's no gravity, right? Or distance is not an issue, right? So these are some of the things that we can remove to let us think about, how will that affect, our solutions that we could come up with. And here, this is one of those few times where we actually want quantity, so the number of ideas over the quality. So we want to get as many ideas as quickly as possible while trying not to worry about things like time, money, gravity, distance, and things like that, so that we could generate a lot of ideas. So this is typically a team effort. I see a couple people nodding. I think, you're all familiar with being part of like group brainstorming. However, we do know sometimes it's really tough to sort of like perform on demand, right? Like everyone's watching you and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to come up with 10 ideas. So one of the ways I want to share with you, and I think this works especially well when your teams are a remote or hybrid, is that you can schedule a time to brainstorm, but part of it's broken down like this. We're going to have the first 15 minutes as being individual brainstorming time, where everyone in the team will write down 5 to 10 ideas within 15 minutes. Now you could do it offline as well, but I think the idea here is because there is time pressure, like you'll dial into the meeting, you could turn off your camera, mute yourself, but there is a time pressure, right? Because the meeting itself has a clock, right? So you're like, okay, 5 to 10 ideas in the first 15 minutes, right? And then what happens in the rest of the time, say it's a half-hour meeting, so another 15 minutes, is that you pool all the ideas, which can be anonymous. So you could just fill out a Google Sheet, or you can, fill out a Google Jamboard or something like that without necessarily putting on your name, so people don't know who put what. And then what this does is that it lets you kind of do the brainstorming without the pressure of, people watching you and people go, oh, but that person, she only put up her hand twice. And, that person over there put up their hands 10 times. But then what this also lets you have the advantage of is that pool of ideas that, that could be 5 to 10 ideas per person times 3 or times 4 or times 5. Right. So, and then because it's mostly anonymous, it also takes off that pressure of, that you have to come up with, 5 of the best ideas, or, that someone's like, well, I think this idea kind of sucked, but I can't think of anything else, but I have to put it down anyways. So that kind of takes off some of that pressure. So both of the methods, traditional group brainstorming and also like a hybrid approach, which I think actually works quite well in like a remote setting or a hybrid setting, they give everyone an opportunity to also build upon each other's ideas. So I think this is also one of the important points. In traditional brainstorming, oftentimes people will just put up their hands or even just yell out ideas, and then your neighbor will be like, oh, but what if we also add this? So the hybrid approach also gives everyone a chance to do that once all the ideas are compiled. And then what I also suggest with this is like, just take a gauge of, what the energy of the team is like. If it's always a high energy team, maybe the way to go is to do the traditional group brainstorming. If it's a lower, quieter team, maybe the hybrid method, in which it's a little bit more, offline and anonymous, would work, but it's always good to switch it up as well, right? Because that lets us to practice using all the tools that we have in our design thinking toolbox. So that's the ideate phase. And at this point, rather than putting in a group activity, what I wanted to insert here was a case study. So this is a case study that was presented to me in one of the IDOU design thinking courses. So IDO, and I've mentioned them a couple of times already, they are a pioneer in the design thinking space. So they've actually been a design thinking consultancy, I think going back as early as the 80s. So they've been around for quite a while. Like I said, they've started in the product design space, and now they're in consumer services and process as well. And not just process that's consumer facing, but also like internal facing. So almost like change management. They've done some work with quite a few of the major toy manufacturers and toy companies, and they actually have a play lab within their own offices. And the play lab portfolio includes brands such as Barbie, Paw Patrol, and Pictionary. So I think we're all probably familiar with either the Barbie, the Paw Patrol, or Pictionary. I've been told that Paw Patrol is actually quite popular right now. And I believe that Spin Master owns Paw Patrol, which is a Canadian company. So that's kind of cool. So oftentimes the IDO consultants are given a client brief that very succinctly summarized just says, help us design the next best selling toy. So what the IDO team will do is that they will start with, the design thinking phase, trying to understand their users, trying to understand their user needs. And then when they get to the ideation phase, this is the funnel or the pyramid in which the ideas are produced. So at the very bottom of your pyramid, they will typically generate upwards of thousands. So not just hundreds, but thousands of toy ideas. And then as they do their idea selection, what they'll then end up with is about a 10th. So 10% of the ideas, which is about 400. So this is where they'll actually, sketch them out in a little bit more detail than, what we were shouting out, like, well, let's use helium balloons, or, let's like pop the balloon or something like that. So having actual sketches, it's about 10%. And from those 10% of the 10%, which is the sketches, they whittle it down further to another 10% of actual prototypes of the toy ideas. And when we talk about prototypes, you can see that there's varying sort of like fidelities for prototypes, but 40% is what they'll do. And this is on the prototypes of the sketches. And then at the end, what goes to market is about 5 to 6 toy ideas, so slightly over 10%. So you can see that from their ideation phase, which is 4,000 toy ideas, they end up with 5 or 6 toy ideas that are actually produced and sold in the market. So when I say, okay, everyone come up with 5 to 10 ideas, that's actually not that many. Ideally, we should try to strive for more, but we're not all like IDO consultants. But when I say 5 to 10 ideas, per person, and then we share them all, keep in mind that we should actually strive for more ideas to be able to take us to that success of which is in this case it's 5 to 6 toy ideas that are produced and sold in market. So in your case, we want that one idea that you will take to, the hackathon final presentation, and then, you knock it out of the park and you win the hackathon. So we'll move on from this. So now I want to talk about some additional ideation tools to help you get to those large quantities of ideas. So one of the biggest things, or one of the greatest tools, is actually sleep on it. I know that, you know, every time you have a bad sleep, you may feel kind of like just not productive, very kind of grumpy. So the best way of actually having good ideas is to sleep on it. And I think I read some research recently that, you know, REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep is key for creative thinking. So I don't know how we would actually, you know, encourage REM sleeping other than to make sure you get good sleep. Other ways of encouraging ideas is go for a walk. I'm sure you've heard the stories of people getting the best ideas in their life when, you know, they're in the shower. So basically doing things that aren't related lets your brain work on the problem. The other one that we've already talked about is to build on team member ideas. So that's why it's so important to do the brainstorming in a group setting, whether you're in a group meeting all together or, you know, you actually end up, you know, pooling your ideas and sharing them later. The other method is to use something called design stimuli. So one of the ways that you could just do it is using random words and objects. So when I showed the tire swing at the beginning, one of the things that you could do is you could try to relate that back to your hackathon problem. And what that will almost always do, because there are no guarantees, is they'll introduce some new ways of looking at your specific problem at hand that you hadn't looked at before, because you are trying to introduce this new random thing to it. And then, so that's pretty unstructured. So, and then what I just wanted to mention is that there are some very structured ways. Maybe Google this, ask ChatGPT about it. But there's also something called TRIZ, which is the Russian theory of inventive problem solving, which the person who came up with this, he actually came up with 40 inventive principles and, you know, descriptions of each one. So what you want to try to do on this list of inventive principles is say, well, what am I, you know, am I trying to do segmentation? Am I trying to periodize? So there, and then once you find the principle, there are suggestions in there. So it's very, very structured. We also don't know if it works. We also can't guarantee that it works, but it's just very interesting that ways to increase your idea space can be as something simple as pick a random word or object to something that's very, very structured. So, like we've went through the IDEO use case or case study for the toy design. So now you have 4,000 ideas, or you have 40, or you have 400. Now what? This is where we have to try to converge all of ideas and then work towards one solution. So work towards like your final hackathon presentation. So this is where you can apply decision-making tools to help converge your design space to prepare for prototyping. So some decision-making tools include the following, and I'm kind of roughly put it to the from the most kind of, I won't say simple, but from the most obvious to more complex. So consensus, where everyone in your group agrees, is you know, it can be a tool. So however, as we know, with, you know, every time we do group work, you know, even with our family, we don't necessarily get consensus with everyone. So what we then want to move on to is kind of taking a look at something called multi-voting. So in this case, what we do is we again leverage the team. And then what happens here is that each team member gets 3 votes and that they can vote for their top 3. Or you can actually allocate the rules however you want. You can say, okay, so everyone must vote for 3 separate things, or you could say, well, you could use 2 of your favorite. You could use 2 of your votes for your favorite and then 1 to the next one. So you can actually do your vote allocation differently. You can certainly rank your ideas based on certain things like usefulness, cost, or time. And then one of the other tools you could use is a decision matrix, because what we do recognize here is nothing's just ever like one one-dimensional. So you could plot this on 2 axes. You could look at things like time versus technical complexity, cost versus ease of implementation, and time available versus executive preference, right? And typically what you'll want to do is you want to choose a quadrant in which the solutions are optimized. So when you're looking at cost versus ease of implementation, you want a low cost or a moderate cost solution that is easy to implement. So very rarely would you ever want a high cost, hard to implement solution. So you can tell from where I'm moving my hands, like with the cost versus ease of implementation, typically you're looking at the lower left quadrant versus something like on the upper right quadrant. So those are some of the tools you can use. There are many other decision-making tools as well, but these are some of the ones that are fairly easy to implement. Okay, moving on to steps 4 and 5, we have prototype and test. So here for prototyping, you can make some quick prototypes, which include things like just drawing a pen and paper rendering of your design. So pen and paper prototypes. You can run experiments and simulations. And then also remember to connect back to your users. So some of the experiments and simulations, you could possibly include people who are part of your user group. And then one of the also important things that you need to do in this prototyping and testing is that you need to iterate. So when you receive feedback from your users in your user group, this is where you can incorporate those feedback into your prototypes. So applying what you learned. So this is an exercise that you could carry out with your group later on your hackathon ideas, is using your use case, apply steps 1 and 2, which is to understand your users and your user needs and problems. And then what you want to do is you want to generate as many ideas as possible to address those needs and problems. So aiming for about 20 ideas. So that's like 7-ish ideas per person in your 3-person groups. And then what you want to do is reduce it to 3 ideas through the idea selection process. And then steps 4 and 5, which is to select one of these ideas to prototype and test. And then, yes, so that's sort of like design thinking in a nutshell. I think we're open for questions now.
Yeah, everyone feel free to unmute yourself, or you can drop your question in the chat so I can help Ivy to answer your questions.
And these slides will be available for other participants, right? Correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Ivy. Yeah, participants will be asking about the slides. We'll share after this session.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, feel free to ask anything, I guess.
Ivy, let's wait for just a couple of minutes if
Okay.
you get any questions. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. It was quite informative for us. I want to ask, like, if we after having the brainstorming and then we get in the final we get 3 ideas, then the next final step is to get one solution out of them.
Yes.
So how to, after those 3 ideas, suppose we feel like there are 2 ideas, those are best, and then we have to finally decide for the one. So what are the steps needs to be taken in mind, like what needs to be focused so that top priority problem needs to get the solution. So what are the things we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, so I think if it was a case where you had a little bit more time, so not necessarily in this hackathon, because I know your timelines are quite tight. Like when you're down to just 2, you know, it's quite probable to prototype them both and then to run tests on both, right? But knowing that this is, you know, the timelines are quite tight in the hackathon, and like I typically run this workshop for other hackathons as well. Like I've run this several times for internal TELUS hackathon. What I suggest to people is to employ those various different decision-making tools. And then, you know, cost is always a big sort of like selector. So, you know, actually maybe like do the economic modeling like as you know, as detailed as possible, because, you know, what if you have a payback time of 3 years versus 5 years for one? That makes a big difference in say, you know, selecting one over the other at places like TELUS, right? Because that's one of the metrics that matters. So I guess just in conclusion, because in a hackathon situation, typically you would not have the ability to prototype them both. To be able, what you want to do is you want to apply your decision-making tools using one of those metrics in more detail, right? So oftentimes when we do apply those decision-making tools, such as a decision-making matrix, we'll use something called t-shirt sizing. So small, medium, large, extra large, right? But we know that like you could also buy shirts in like size 1, size 2, size 3, size 4, right? So it's really being able to find like going from that t-shirt sizing to like that more numeric sizing, so that you can make that decision, you know, is payback 3 years or 5 years? You know, that makes a big difference in the corporate world. So that's how I would do, that's how I would approach it. It's like when you're down to 2, like try to then do one of those decision axes in more detail.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we have a chat question.
Yeah.
Is that the first one?
Yeah, we have a question from Anna. So she was telling about in case of the hackathon ideas, would be in the format of, sorry, in the case of hackathon, our ideas would be in the format of MVP or MLP with different features instead of one best idea, like the toy making case study. Yeah, should we think of it as finding the best combinations or finding the best feature?
I think in this case, what you want to be able to do is find the best feature that solves the biggest problem. So the whole idea with the minimum viable product is to be able to show that it works and it solves most of the problem. So I think that's, you know, again, it goes back to, you know, when we're trying to quantify our solution, to be able to like develop that KPI so that, you know, we are a little bit more fine-tuned and granular. So not just small, medium, large. We want to actually say, well, is this an 8 or is this a 10? Right? Or is this an 8 or is this a 9? So though that's the way that I would suggest approaching it. And then also understanding, you know, when you have your list of user needs, which was the biggest need? You know, are we trying to optimize for cost? Is that the biggest one, or is speed the biggest one? Does that help, Anna?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, Anna, I hope that answers your question. And we have another question from Hannah. You spoke about cohesiveness in the equation a few slides back, saying it stands for, does this make sense? So does it make sense to make this product, or does it make sense for the user? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, thanks for distinguishing between, you know, the designer, which is yourselves, and the user. So just to give a little bit more context on that study, I was asking users, so consumers. So in this case, the cohesiveness is, does this make sense to the consumer, right? does it make sense to the final user? So because they're ultimately the ones who make those purchasing decisions. So yes, it may make a lot of sense for me to produce something in a certain way because, you know, it's the lowest cost. I could do it all within, you know, 2 local factories and things like that. But if what I produce doesn't make sense to the user when they look at it, then they won't buy it. So yes, the answer to that question, it's from the consumers or the customer or the user's perspective, which are, I'm using it interchangeably at this point for that study. Does that help answer the question? Cool. Okay, I see the confirmation for both Hannah and Hanea that I seem to have been able to clarify things.
Yeah. And we have like Iris. Yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. I see you raised your hand.
Yeah. Thank you, Ivey, for the great presentation. I actually have one follow-up question on what you just discussed, the question that Anna just shared with us. So I was wondering, like, for example, like after we got the idea, like the finalized idea and work on it, and then I mean like in a more generalized case, and then what if it doesn't work as we expected, or maybe the user didn't buy the idea as we thought, then is it anything happen like this before, and how are we going to like tackle this kind of problem? Should we go to like the second idea or something like that?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important point. So when we talk about prototyping and testing, you know, this goes back to the question of, you know, what if we have like two ideas that were ranked much better than the third one, and you know, how do we deal with that? And I said, well, hopefully in a real life situation, you're able to prototype and test them both, where all of those unintended functionalities should be exposed, right? So again, should be exposed. And that's why, like, I encourage that to happen sort of like in a real life situation, because that is where you should be able to observe like all the unintended consequences of your design, and then what you do is you iterate, or you drop the second one. Say the second one had a lot of unintended consequences come out. You drop the second one, you go with the first one. But then I would also say, you know, in a hackathon situation where timelines are typically really tight, you just kind of do it on paper. But I think one of the things that, you know, even in a hackathon, and, you know, I talked about, you could have like really low fidelity prototypes where you're just, you know, say you make a couple sketches and, you know, you show them to an end user and you say, well, what would you choose? Like on this, you know, you say you drew like a graphical user interface, and you say, user, what would you choose, right? And if they can choose the right one or demonstrate that they choose what you want them to choose, versus like another layout where they're choosing the ones that, you know, you don't want them to choose, then that also helps you. So that does also take you sort of like into the prototyping space, but on a very kind of low fidelity, low commitment, like you're just drawing some stuff on a piece of paper, right? Or a tablet, or you mock up your Figma file really quickly, right? So I think, you know, that's the emphasis here, that, you know, whatever you could do really quickly, you do. And then, yeah, so I think, you know, in a hackathon situation though, a lot of it is like you have to move fast. So if you know, in a hack, and then, you know, hopefully what will happen in some cases is that the hackathon winners go into like an incubator where you can actually work out sort of those unintended consequences that show up, because there is a lot of iteration. Does that help,
Okay.
Iris?
Yeah, that's very helpful, and especially like the point you mentioned, like how we can use the lowest cost to kind of validate
Yeah.
the idea. Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah. We have another.
Yeah, Shreya, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, if we have a conflicting feedback from our customers, like one is giving a positive and other is giving negative, or something like conflicting, how to handle that situation? What to do in that case?
Like there, one says I love this and one says I hate this. Is
Yeah.
that kind of conflicting? I think
Yeah.
I think it's useful to kind of try to get the voice of the customer, and oftentimes the feedback we get from them are like on surveys, right? So I think it'll be very useful to actually have sort of like one-on-one conversations with the customer in the design phase to understand exactly what it is that they oppose without necessarily offering like like other solutions, right? So that you can kind of understand at the bottom of it, like it goes back to like the customer's needs and problems, right? Even without necessarily like making the button a different color, yeah, and say, oh, is this better now? Right? So because it's at the heart of it, it goes back to like the idea of user-centered design, and just try to understand like what is it about your approach that they are not liking.
We can make enhancement rather than redesigning it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We have one question in the chat. So regarding Hanaya's question, if we develop an application for business that will be used by end users, should we build product to meet the needs of both the business and the end user? Like, what should we focus more on? So it's on the business or the end user?
That's a very good question. So it is, a balance between what can the business do and what the customer needs. I think, in most of like in most cases, it can be a pretty good balance, right? But it is a very tough question, because if you build exactly what the business need but not what the customer wants, like no one's going to use your product, right? Whereas if you were to build exactly what your customer wants and not what your business can do, it could potentially be a very long and expensive process. So it is a lot of balancing. I know that's not necessarily an easy easy question, and that's why that I'm sort of giving the answer that's like, yeah, you need to work on seeing how you can balance it. So it's one of those things. It's like what's the most important to your end user, right? So it does go back to sort of like the user needs and problems, and can you solve it in a way that's not going to be extra long and extra expensive. So yeah, that's sort of like my advice on that very hard question.
Yeah, thanks, Chi, for asking the question. So I hope this answers your question. And I think like oh, thanks for the confirmation. And that's all the questions we have in the chat. And also yeah, also we're on time, so this is great. And I think like I hope this is the I can wrap up this session. I hope everyone like it answered everyone's questions, from the questions what we got so far. And I would like to take a moment to thank Ivey for this inspiring and insightful session today we have on the design thinking. So I would like to say like your talk that's really beautifully emphasized the importance of both empathy and creativity in solving, real world problems. So that's the exact mindset. That's so valuable for our participants as well. This kind of mindset. So I would like to thank you, Ivy, and everyone who joined today and asked such thoughtful questions. So yeah, we hope this session gives you the fresh ideas and the frameworks to apply as you continue shaping your projects going forward. And our next mentor session will be on Friday, followed by a technical workshop. So make sure to join there to share your progress as well. Yeah, thanks, Ivy, for
Okay.
joining here, and thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck, everyone.
Thank you.